Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are stepping into one of the most personal dimensions of artificial intelligence, which is privacy. AI models thrive on data. They learn from it, adapt to it, and also make decisions based on it. But behind every data point is a human story. It's your medical records, your voice recording, your face, and even your voice, right? So as AI become more embedded in our everyday life, the question isn't just what they know, but also what they should know. So now let's start by unpacking the following 3 questions at the heart of any conversation about AI privacy. These questions were not technical ones, but ethical ones. They shape how we design, deploy, and regulate the AI that can really respect the human rights. First of all, what kind of information are they collecting? AI systems are collecting a wide range of data, some visible and some invisible. Think about your smartphone. It knows almost everything about you, right? It knows who you call, it knows your health status, and it knows your voice and your location, and even some other biometric data, such as your fingerprint and your facial scan. So the key question here is informed consent. Are we really aware of what kind of information are we being collected? And do the system really have the control over it? Secondly, what are they doing with our data? Once being collected, the data rarely just stay there, right? Oftentimes, the data is being processed, analyzed, and used to train the model. However, the key question here is the transparency and accountability of data processing procedure. Sometimes they may want to predict our mood based on our typing speed and predict our political leaning based on our social media data, and also predict our health status based on the wearable device. However, are we really informed of this procedure, and are we really happy about this kind of analysis applied to us? Thirdly, who are they sharing our secrets with? Usually, data will come from different sources and be further distributed to some downstream organizations such as data broker or government for the surveillance purpose. And this is exactly where user trust can easily break down, because as you can imagine, your personal secrecy might be exposed to some untrusted parties. And if users have totally no control over their own data, they will be left very, very vulnerable. Now let's ground this in reality. Privacy risks are actually happening here in Hong Kong. According to the Office of Privacy Commissioner of Personal Data, they find that about half of Hong Kong organizations are now using AI systems to collect personal data, and about 70% of them are posing privacy risks at varying level. And this is not just unique to Hong Kong, it's a very powerful snapshot of the global trend that is happening currently. Another example is related to DeepSeek, which is a very powerful AI model, especially in China. According to this news report, DeepSeek is leaking very sensitive information, including users' chat history with AI, and also the users' backend information, such as their password and some private information to the external world. And what we saw with DeepSeek in Hong Kong are not just isolated incidents. They are part of much larger and complex puzzle. So now let's turn our attention to the issue of jigsaw of privacy leak. In today's data environment, privacy leaks are not just becoming more frequent. They are even becoming harder to detect, contain, and often can return very invisible until it's too late. One of the biggest culprits of this is the shadow data. Shadow data refer to the data that is stored in some unmanaged and often forgotten place, such as the outdated cloud resources, some unmanaged abandoned database, and also your storage hardware that is forgotten by you in a certain corner of your house for extremely long time. Because these databases are no longer maintained and they are not actively looked after, so they are extremely vulnerable to privacy risk. So this year, 35% of data breach are actually happening to shadow data, and also because they are in the shadow, so it will always take longer for this kind of data breach to be detected and even longer to be contained. On average, it will take 291 days for the data breach of shadow data to be detected by someone. So it's nearly 1 year. Now we have learned how privacy risks have become more prevalent and harder to contain in AI era. Before we dive deeper into solution, now let's take a step back. We need to have some basic understanding of what privacy actually means in digital landscape. What are its core principles and what rights do individuals have? So now let's turn to the privacy basics. In our everyday life, we usually use privacy interchangeably with several other concepts, such as secrecy, intimacy, limited access to self, and fair information practice. All these concepts are either too broad or too narrow. First of all, privacy is a secrecy. This is a very classic view. Many people believe that privacy should protect all the things that we try to hide in secrecy. However, this definition is too arbitrary and too subjective. Different people will have different intention and will have different subjective evaluation of things' importance, right? So yeah, this kind of definition is too subjective and cannot be universally applied to all individuals. Secondly, privacy is intimacy. This definition is closely related to your personal emotion, personal affection, and personal relationship with others. However, privacy is not only intimate information. What about your social credit number, your employment history? These are not intimate, right? It is not directly related to your personal relationship with others. However, this information is private. So privacy is intimacy as a definition is too narrow. Thirdly, privacy is limited access to self. This one is more nuanced. What about someone taking a photo of you in the public area even though you don't want them to have this kind of access to you? Is it a privacy violation? No, it is not. There's no privacy violation no matter you want it or not in the public area. And similarly, when you are not in the mood for any conversation, but you are bumping into someone in the elevator, could you blame him or her for violating your privacy? No, this is not. So privacy as limited access is not the definition suitable for defining privacy. Okay, and lastly, privacy is following fair information practice. Specifically, fair information practice usually refer to the kind of user consent that the platform will gather at the beginning of service provision. And privacy, of course, is something more beyond the fair information practice. Okay, even though it is related to fair information practice, but user consent is never sufficient for satisfying privacy standards. Okay. So there is no universal definition for privacy, but now I want to introduce several popular working definitions for your reference. The first definition is that privacy is the right to be let alone. This is a very popular definition which stems from a 1890 Harvard Law Review article. And the idea is very simple. It is a response to the intrusive technologies at the time. So the idea is that anyone should be granted a private space free from unwanted intrusion from others. So you need to have your private space, and every time when you don't want to be disrupted, you can get into your own room and then close the door and then enjoy your own freedom. This is the basic and very simple idea behind this definition of privacy as the right to be let alone. However, this idea can become more complex in the AI age because it is not only about closing the door nowadays. AI can still interrupt into your life, even though your door is already closed, right? So in AI era, privacy as being let alone is more about how your data travel, how your identity is disclosed to others, and also how your decisions are shaped by external force. And second definition is privacy, defined as the right to respectful private and family life. This definition was first proposed by European Convention on Human Rights. It emphasizes humans' dignity and autonomy for developing personal relationships. So it entails some right to develop one's own personalities and maintain the relationships as they want, and also live without external interference. So privacy usually will be understood either as the right to be let alone or the right to respect for private and family life. Besides, another group of people usually advocate for a new lens of understanding privacy as user control. It means that individuals should be able to determine for themselves when, how, and what information about themselves is communicated to others. Privacy as control have given a very great and variable approach for the platform designer to implementing some feature that can help maximize user autonomy and user control. For example, this approach will encourage platform designer to provide as detailed privacy setting as possible to the users. However, there are some people challenging privacy as a control as more overly simplistic and even illusionary, because in their critical opinion, if the users are provided with too much control but they do not use it, then it will even impose greater risk over this group of users. Okay, for example, if you are offered an option to turn off location tracking, but you don't do that, then the platform might take it for granted and assume that you don't mind being tracked all the time. This will somehow enhance your vulnerability to privacy breach. Okay, so there are some debate around privacy as a control approach. Despite this debate, my humble opinion is that privacy control is always a good thing, even though some users might not exercise it. And in my opinion, the users might be lazy to check out privacy control because the privacy controls are not properly designed. Okay, sometimes the privacy settings are not that accessible, are not that reader friendly, and also the privacy alert might not be provided in good context, in good timing. So for the platform designers, they should make more effort to make the privacy control more accessible to the user and also more friendly to user based on their different educational and cultural background. Anyway, in my opinion, privacy control is a good thing, but its implementation outcome might vary because of the design quality. Anyway, the privacy issue and privacy considerations should be embedded throughout the entire life cycle of product development, from information collection to information processing to information dissemination. And finally, when there are some privacy invasion happened, you also need to design some mitigation strategy to reduce or compensate for its cost and harms. So now let's move beyond privacy basic and start to talk more about privacy in the practice. In the US, personal identifiable information, PII, is a key concept underlying the privacy implementation. And legally, PII is defined as any information that can be used to distinguish or trace or link an individual. Okay, so yeah, this is a very long definition, and I highlight these three keywords out of it, which are distinguish, trace, and linkable. These three keywords are corresponding to three key characteristics determining PII. Okay, then I will go over them one by one. To distinguish an individual is to identify his or her real identity. For example, I can identify you based on your credit card number. So the credit card number is PII. Then what about the credit scores? Because there might be multiple and even hundreds of thousands of people sharing the same credit score. So credit score alone without being linked with the other information is not considered PII. then what about your DSE score? Similarly, the DSE score without being linked with your name or your ID is not considered PII. Okay, but there are some rare cases where you probably will be the only one with this DSE score. Then in this case, DSE might be revealing of your real identity. Then in this case, the DSE can be converted into the PII. But for the most cases, the DSE score, the widely shared among population will not be considered PII. Okay. And secondly, to trace an individual is to determine his or her activities or status over time. A very straightforward example is the audit log, or say your browsing history, which will allow other people to know what you are watching at a certain point of time and what you are watching next after the video. Okay, so this kind of information, the browsing history, also called cookies, okay, is considered PII because it allows other people to trace your status and your activities over time. Finally, linkable information cannot directly trace or identify an individual, but it can be linked to other data sources to build a full picture. So think of a puzzle piece. On its own, it's meaningless. However, when it was connected to other pieces, it is revealing. This linkability characteristic is particularly dangerous in AI era because the AI models are aggregating data from different sources. So what might seem harmless in isolation might become very harmful when linked with others. Linkability is closely related to the uniqueness of the record. Imagine there is a database including records about ethnicity, gender, and also income. If there is only one Asian woman in the data set that makes over 5 million US dollars per year, only over 10 are existing in the entire population, then the linkability of that record is extremely high, even when the name is removed, right? You don't need to know the name. You only need to know this record is referring to a woman, an Asian woman who can make over 5 million US dollar per year. You can still identify her real identity. So linkability is a very complicated characteristic. You need to calculate the uniqueness of the record. So this is a kind of paradox of anonymous data. Linkability is closely related to the uniqueness of the record. Imagine a database including records about ethnicity, income, and gender. If there is only one Asian woman in this database that can make over 5 million US dollars per year, but a total of 10 are existing in the population, then the linkability of that record to the population is extremely high, even if you do not include the name for that woman, but the combination of other attributes might still make her uniquely identifiable. Okay. Similarly, if you have a very rare surname like, let's say, for example, Yongzhouyi Yong. This is a very rare surname, okay? Even if you hide your home address, but the combination of your surname, of that rare surname, and the residential region may still make your real identity identifiable to other people, okay? Because of the uniqueness of your surname. And sensitivity is another critical issue. PII will be considered as sensitive if it can bring down some harm to individuals. Okay, so think about the educational background, your medical records, your financial records, and also your employment histories. These states are not just neutral facts. They are deeply personal, and handling this data can bring out very, very negative and personal consequences for individuals. So we need to pay extra attention to disclosing this information and also pay extra attention to audit how companies are using this sensitive information. And the sensitivity will even be heightened when it comes to protected groups, especially children, okay? Children are our future. So we need to double down our effort to protect them because they have a very long way to live. We should not devastate their future by disclosing their privacy at a very young age when they cannot properly protect themselves. So this kind of issue, the age issue, is also very important, and the sensitivity will be even higher when it comes to children or underage groups. While PII is widely used in America, the concept of personal data is widely used in European context. So European countries and European organizations are mostly relying on personal data, this legal concept, when handling user information. And specifically, personal data covers a much wider range of information than PII. Here is its legal definition. Personal data refer to any data relating to an identifiable natural person, such as a name, an identification number, such as Hong Kong ID number, okay, or the user ID, location data, an online identifier, such as your email address, or the factors specific to the physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, or social identity of that natural person. Okay, what I highlight here are the additional elements added by the personal data. So it means that personal data covers not only those identifiable information, but also the information that is revealing of someone's social or cultural identity. Okay, for example, your partisanship, okay, your party affiliation. This is considered personal data in European countries. However, partisanship is not PII because there are many members existing in a certain big parties like Democratic or Republicans. There are millions of people inside the party. So partisanship in US is not considered PII. However, in European context, this information is considered revealing of one's political, social identity. So it will be protected under the scope of personal data. And similarly, your subjective information, such as your political opinion, your personal judgment of other people, is also considered personal data because of it can reveal your personal and cultural beliefs. Okay. However, the GDPR definition of personal data does not cover the following three categories. First of all, it does not cover information about someone who has already passed away. Okay, so personal data is only the information only about individuals who are still alive. Okay, it does not cover someone who has already passed away. And secondly, personal data doesn't cover properly anonymized data. So if the data is fully anonymized without being possibility to be linked with other data source to identify the individual, then we will not consider such fully anonymized data as personal. Okay. And thirdly, it does not cover the information about public authorities or companies. So celebrities or government officials or companies do not have privacy protection because of their public nature, okay? And GDPR, okay, I didn't cover this concept. What is GDPR? GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, which is the most comprehensive and all-encompassing legislature protecting user data, protecting individual privacy in the world. Okay, so it's a very powerful and it's a very good reference if you want to learn the legal way to protect one's privacy. Okay, it is always a very good reference to start with. Okay, and GDPR applies to any organization, not only operating within the individual, but also other organization that does not operate within EU, but still often offer the service to European people. So even though your company might be based in Hong Kong and all of your staff are working in Hong Kong, but so long as there is one European citizens, European members that have been using your service, so you need to be compliant with GDPR. So GDPR is also considered the actual extraterritorial law, which has very profound influence not only within the border of EU but also outside EU, so long as you want to access their population, so long as you want to sell the product to their citizens. Okay, now let's have a quick test of what we have just learned. Is email address PII or personal data or both? Email address is owned by one individual. So email address is also known as the online identifier of an individual. So it is considered both as PII and personal data, okay? Secondly, zip code, referring to a specific province or state, is it considered PII or personal data? Typically, the zip code associated with the province or state usually will cover millions or even tens of millions of people. So it is not that identifiable. It cannot be directly used to link or to identify a certain individual. So it is considered neither PII nor personal data, okay? And thirdly, cookies. What is cookies? Cookies in this context refer to users' browsing history. It is not the biscuits, it's not the sweets you usually have. You refer to your internet browsing history. And internet browsing history can trace an individual's activities or actions over time on the internet. So it is considered both PII and personal data. Okay, then what about gender? A gender group is composed of billions of people, so gender is not considered PII because it lacks the identifiability, traceability, and linkability, so to say, okay? However, gender is a kind of either social identity or physical identity of an individual, so gender is considered personal data and should be protected under GDPR, okay, in European context. Now I want to introduce several other particularities that is empowered by GDPR. First of all, GDPR protects individuals' right to be forgotten. So the European citizens supported by GDPR will have a right to ask the platform to totally erase their personal data and to be forgotten by the platform. And also they are granted with a right to withdraw or change their prior consent. And secondly, right to access. So individual users should have the right to retain a copy of the data. Thirdly, cross-border transfer of personal data is prohibited without approval from the European Commission. So European users' data should be processed locally within the border of Europe. So if you are working for a Hong Kong company, and most of your colleagues are based in Hong Kong, but you still have several European consumers who are using your service. So then in compliance with GDPR's regulation regarding cross-border transfer of personal data, you have to deploy some European-based storage, hardware, and software in order to process European users' data locally, okay, without disobeying this regulation. As we wrap up our discussion, now let's shift our focus to what the companies can do to uphold the ethical standard and also provide individual privacy, especially when it is developing some AI systems. First of all, clear purpose. Every company should start with transparency, clearly defining what data they are collecting for what purpose. This can greatly limit the misuse of the data and can also help users developing a clear understanding of what they are actually consenting to. And secondly, before launching a system, the company should conduct some privacy impact assessment, asking what kind of risk that this feature might impose on individuals, and also proactively design the mitigation strategy for those risks. And thirdly, data minimization. Only collect data that is necessary and don't collect the data that doesn't help system functions, okay? Because less data means less risk and more respect for user autonomy. And fourthly, data quality. Bad data will lead to bad decision. So the company should ensure the data is relevant, verified, and also accurate, especially when it comes to the data coming from the third parties. Next, robust consent. User consent should be free, specific, understandable, and also revocable. The company should provide users with the right to be forgotten and also the right to change their earlier consent. Oftentimes, the ordinary people do not have the patience to go over those details written in the terms of condition closely. So the company should try their best to help user better understand the terms of conditions as well as the risk that it might entail. Lastly, responsiveness. The company and their customer service should be reachable, okay? No user should be ghosted. So we need to ensure user complaints can finally be channeled to some responsible persons. So after you complete your study in university, you may need to work for some technology companies. And if you are assigned to the job related to user experience design or customer service, I hope this best practice can help you better navigate your job requirements. Even if you don't work for the company, there are still some best practice for ordinary users. First of all, limit your personal information shared with technology. You should avoid putting sensitive information such as your full name, address, ID numbers, financial data, or medical records when you are talking with AI chatbot. I have seen some students trying out some fortune-telling AI, and they don't even know whether this AI is reliable or robust. They just want to try it out. And in order to try it out, they have to provide their full name, their birth date, and even the information about their family. And when I ask them, are you scared of privacy violation? They even don't know those information that they disclose are actually private information. So at least after this lecture, I hope all of you can gain a better understanding of what privacy actually is. And I also want to enhance your awareness of protecting yourself from privacy violation. This is really, really dangerous. Second, only use trusted platforms. Next, you should try to educate yourself, start from today, start to reviewing the privacy settings. Actually, all the platforms nowadays are already equipped with some privacy controls. So you can choose whether the platform should track your location, whether it can have the access to your photos, how many photos it can have the access. So I know it's very tiring and it's very time consuming, but you should try yourself. This is a very good experience of self-education. You should try to customize those available privacy controls to restrict the data sharing and ensure that only the necessary data is shared. Okay, and also when the data is no longer necessary for the system function, you should definitely change it back, okay, to a low privacy disclosure level. Next, be cautious with file uploads. These days, a growing number of AI systems can analyze the files uploaded by users. And I know that some of you may want the system to read an article as a PDF file, okay, and then create a summary for your reference. However, you need to know that if the file that you uploaded is copyrighted, okay, then by uploading such a file to a commercial product, which will probably reuse the file for profit-making purpose, then you might be violating the author's copyright. Okay, this will be legally dangerous and legally unacceptable. And also, sometimes the file that you upload might include some personal information while you don't notice it. This will also be dangerous for your own. Okay, and finally, it is a good habit to log out the content every time when you have ended the dialogue with the AI. Okay, when it is possible, I always encourage you to log out the account. Okay, and try to avoid creating those shadow data where you don't have the attention, where you don't have the intention to share. So yeah, to summarize, Whether you are using some existing AI models or designing your own AI models, it is essential to evaluate and align them with the FAT principle, which are fairness, accountability, and transparency. Okay, so that's all for today's class, and I hope you enjoy our discussion and look forward to see you next week.